What happens when U.S. Representative Ilhan Omar shows up in Minneapolis, not for a town hall, but to confront federal agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, after the fatal shooting of Renee Nicole Good? How did a local law enforcement tragedy explode into mass mobilization, national outrage, and a political firestorm that even Senator Joni Ernst couldn't ignore? Well, on January 7th, 2026, as part of a massive Department of Homeland Security, DHS-led operation under President Donald J. Trump's administration, an ICE agent shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Good in Minneapolis. Now, Good's death instantly became a flashpoint, igniting protests in cities nationwide, sparking debates over federal authority, police accountability, and even civil liberties. Now, in Minneapolis alone, tens of thousands of people marched from Powderhorn Park to outside the Whipple ICE Processing Center, demanding justice, transparency, and even calls to abolish ICE. Local leaders charged with grief and fury clashed with federal officials. Lawmakers were denied entry to inspect the ICE facility. National polling shifted, and even social movements found a new rally cry. But this story, it didn't stay local. It hit the Capitol, redefining how Americans perceive immigration enforcement, protests, and even political accountability in 2026. By the way, drop a quick like for the video and subscribe to show your support for the news, folks, if you appreciate the news and updates that I bring you every single day, multiple times per day. This is where the story stops being about a protest and it becomes about power. On the ground in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the death of Renee Nicole Good during an encounter with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement operating under the authority of the Department of Homeland Security detonated a political chain reaction. ICE was executing federal enforcement policy under President Donald J. Trump, not freelancing, not improvising, carrying out the law as written. And within hours, Minneapolis transformed from a city into a mourning capital into the epicenter of a national confrontation. That, my friends, is exactly when Ilhan Omar, a sitting U.S. Congresswoman, inserted herself directly into active federal enforcement zones. Not to de-escalate, not to wait for facts, but to confront ICE agents on the scene, knowing full well the optics and the consequences. Now, Minneapolis became ground zero because it wasn't just about one death. It was about whether federal authority still means anything when local political figures decide to challenge it publicly. Now, under Trump, ICE enforcement has not been ambiguous. In fact, DHS has made its mandate clear, and yet Omar's presence turned a law enforcement tragedy into a political spectacle, ultimately, instantly mobilizing activists, igniting protests, and hardening sides. Now, in that moment right there, power, not compassion, this became the currency, and the country felt it snap. So here's the part that most people were never told. Renee Nicole Good was not some random bystander who happened upon a chaotic scene. She was actually very politically active, deeply involved in anti-ICE activism, and connected to ICE Watch, an organization whose explicit purpose is to monitor, disrupt, and interfere with ICE operations. Now, that context matters, and you're not going to find this on most mainstream media news outlets, maybe not on CNN or MSNBC or ABC News. And I want you to understand that this context really does matter, not to diminish a life lost, but to really understand why facts were immediately drowned out by narrative. So within minutes of her death, Renee Good was elevated from individual to symbol, and her story was simplified, stripped of complexity, and repackaged as proof of systemic oppression. Now, responsibility at this point vanished, context disappeared, and ultimately emotion was weaponized. The narrative hardened before investigations could breathe, before evidence could surface, and even before accountability could be discussed. Now, ICE Watch and aligned activists framed this incident as state violence, not as a volatile enforcement encounter. Political figures amplified that framing because it was useful. Grief became leverage, outrage became strategy, and Renee Good's life, rather than being honored with truth, was used as fuel to attack ICE, DHS, and the Trump administration's enforcement posture. So this is the tension that defines this entire story. Emotion versus responsibility, and when politics rushes in, facts get buried. And once that happens, justice becomes secondary to power. And stories like this, they don't just hit politically, they hit financially. Now, if you're over 40 years old and you plan on retiring someday, the window to protect what you've already built may be a lot smaller than you think. Now, here's a question that most people never think to stop and ask. Is your portfolio actually built for what's coming next? Now, a lot of investors in their 40s and 50s, they actually realize something uncomfortable. They've got almost no exposure to real assets, no precious metals, no hard protection. Their entire future is tied to markets, policy, policies and paper promises. And when conditions change fast, as we're watching happen in real time right now, these promises, they don't always hold. And so as retirement shifts from someday to right around the corner, protecting what you've already earned becomes just as important as growing it. This is why I work with Noble Gold Investments. They help people reduce risk by adding physical gold to their portfolios. There's no pressure, there's no gimmicks, just clear answers and a strategy built personally for you around your goals. Now, if you want to take a look, just visit RonYatesGold.com. Click the link down below. That is RonYatesGold.com to learn more and to ask questions. And just matter of fact, give my friends at Noble Gold a phone call right now at 877-646-5347 and tell my friends over at Noble Gold Investments that Ron Yates says hello. Now, this is why this mattered instantly. Within hours of Renee Nicole Good's death, the reaction online wasn't just loud, it was fractured. Now, on the left, grief turned into accusation at light speed. ICE was declared guilty before evidence even surfaced. The Department of Homeland Security was framed as occupying force, and Ilhan Omar's megaphone amplified that outrage into a national call to confront federal authority itself. But something unexpected happened at the exact same time. The right mobilized just as fast, not out of apathy, but out of alarm. Millions watched clips and they read timelines, and they asked a very different question. When did enforcing the law become a crime? Under President Donald J. Trump, ICE enforcement was neither secret nor new. What was new was the attempt to politically overrun it. That split reaction, anger versus alarm, it created rare convergence. People who disagree on almost everything, they found common ground on one thing. This wasn't just about a shooting. It was about whether emotion now outranks the law, whether mobs decide outcomes, whether federal authority collapses the moment that it's challenged loudly enough. Well, fear and symbolism collided. The left, they saw a martyr. The right saw a warning, and both sides felt the shakes rise at once. This is why this didn't fade. It spread. Now, this is where the protest narrative starts collapsing. As the story unfolded, attention shifted to ICE Watch, the activist network tied to Renee Nicole Good. So ICE Watch doesn't just observe enforcement. It trains activists to insert themselves into operations, to film agents, crowd vehicles, shout commands, and attempt what they call de-arrests. Now, this isn't a protest. That is clearly interference. Now, under federal law, obstructing ICE is not symbolic resistance. It's a crime. And once the public learned what ICE Watch actually teaches, the framing changed. Videos and training materials revealed coordinated tactics that were designed to overwhelm agents, disrupt arrests, and provoke confrontation. That exposure cracked the emotional shield that was built around the protests. And when that emotional shield cracks, something else becomes obvious too. Now, most people, they spend their entire lives pushing harder, working more hours, chasing raises, grinding endlessly, thinking that that's how you get ahead. But most people who actually build momentum, they don't think that way. That's why Flywheeler's income society is all about. So instead of trading time for money, the focus is on building income that builds itself, assets, systems, and recurring income, recurring revenue streams that compound over time. No overnight wins, no hype, just momentum that stacks. Now, the reason that this community exists is simple. Building alone is hard. And most people are surrounded by grinders who don't even realize that there's another way to play the game. Now, if you want to be around builders instead of grinders, people who think long-term instead of week to week, you can learn more about Flywheeler's Income Society at the link down below. All right, so let's get back to what this exposure really revealed. Suddenly, the answer wasn't just what ICE did, but what activists were instructed to do. Now, the narrative flipped quickly from victimhood to responsibility, from peaceful assembly to calculated disruption. And when that happened, public sympathy fractured. Now, this wasn't a spontaneous outpouring of grief. This was an organized pressure campaign that miscalculated how Americans would actually react once the tactics were exposed. Now, the more ICE Watch's playbook surfaced, the harder it became to pretend that this was just about mourning. It was about control. People noticed that. And so this wasn't a snub, it was a line. When Ilhan Omar arrived at the Whipple ICE Processing Center in Minneapolis, she didn't show up quietly. Cameras were rolling. Protesters were already energized. Tensions were very high after the death of Renee Nicole Good, and federal agents from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement operating under the Department of Homeland Security, they made a decision right then and there that would instantly go viral. They denied her entry. Now, here's the part many people miss. Congressional oversight does not grant unlimited access to active federal facilities during ongoing operations, especially when safety, evidence, integrity, and personnel security are at stake. ICE wasn't defying Congress. It was enforcing protocol. Under President Donald J. Trump, DHS has made it very clear that enforcement zones are not political stages. By showing up in the middle of an active situation, Ilhan Omar forced ICE into a binary choice: bend the rules for a politician or enforce them evenly. They chose enforcement. That decision alone reframed everything. It wasn't that she's a Democrat. It wasn't that Trump's administration is Republican, but this confrontation wasn't about transparency anymore. It was about whether federal authority could still say no to power. And when that gate stayed closed, that symbolism exploded far beyond Minneapolis. Now, the image, it did the damage. A sitting Democratic congresswoman by the name of Ilhan Omar blocked by federal agents. No shouting match needed, no arrest, just a firm refusal at the gate of the Whipple ICE Processing Center. Under a Trump presidency, that moment right there landed like a thunderclap inside Democratic politics. Why? Because it shattered a long-held assumption that visibility equals authority, that showing up guarantees control of the narrative. Instead, Ilhan Omar looked powerless in a moment designed to project strength. Now, the optics were brutal. Supporters saw defiance, swing voters saw disorder, and critics saw confirmation that Democrats had lost the plot. The clip spread instantly, not because of what was said, but because of what it represented. Federal agents enforcing rules without apology. A politician accustomed to commanding attention suddenly constrained by law. Now, that contrast went viral because it felt new. Now, for Democrats already struggling to explain their position on immigration, this was gasoline on a fire. The party wasn't just defending a policy anymore. It was defending behavior. And that's a much harder sell. That single denial shifted momentum, and it didn't stop there. So this is where the facts finally caught up. As the protests raged and emotion dominated headlines, Senator Joni Ernst stepped in and did what almost no one else was willing to do. She slowed the conversation down and dragged it right on back to law, evidence, and accountability. So while Ilhan Omar leaned into spectacle, Joni Ernst leaned into substance, questioning claims, timelines, and the legal boundaries that govern federal enforcement. Joni Ernst didn't argue from ideology. She argued from statute. She pointed out what ICE is authorized to do, what DHS protocols require, and where activist narratives were overstating or outright ignoring key facts. That shift mattered because once the debate moved from how it feels to what the law actually says, the emotional framing, it began to crack. Now, for Ilhan Omar, this was the worst possible turn for her. Her strategy depended on moral outrage, overwhelming scrutiny. Joni Ernst's intervention, it essentially flipped the spotlight, exposing gaps, contradictions, and even unanswered questions. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about denying compassion. It was about denying reality. Viewers who had been pulled in by raw emotion, they now have a second frame to evaluate the situation from. And many didn't like what they saw. Joni Ernst didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She didn't even have to. She finished the argument by grounding it. And once that happened, the momentum shifted decisively. Now, this collision, it was inevitable. Under President Donald J. Trump, ICE enforcement wasn't ambiguous or ad hoc. It was a stated mandate. DHS was directed to enforce immigration law consistently, regardless of local political resistance. That clarity stood in sharp contrast to Minnesota's political leadership, which, by the way, had spent years signaling hostility toward federal enforcement while offering rhetorical cover-up to activist groups. The Renee incident forced that tension into the open. Minnesota officials tried to reframe the event as federal overreach. The Trump administration countered by emphasizing uniform enforcement and officer safety. Two authorities, state sentiment versus federal law. They were suddenly staring each other down. Now, here's the real critical part. Federal law doesn't defer to local outrage. Sanctuary rhetoric doesn't override statute. When Minnesota's political class sided emotionally with protesters while federal agents were executing lawful orders, the divide hardened. The public saw it clearly. One side governed by feelings, the other by enforcement. Trump's posture was simple. The law applies everywhere, or it applies nowhere. Now, that message resonated far beyond Minneapolis. It reframed the debate from compassion versus cruelty to order versus collapse. And once framed that way, the national reckoning began. What's happening in Minneapolis is a reminder of something bigger that hits a lot closer to home. A retiree told this story recently. He sat down one night and finally added it all up. Nothing dramatic happened. No policy cancellation, no letter in the mail, but his Medicare costs had quietly crept up about $200 a month. By the time he noticed, $2,400 was gone. No refund, no warning, just money drained out slowly while life went on. This is how most people get hit, not all at once, but silently. This is why I partner with Chapter. They help you see where your Medicare coverage is quietly leaking money before another year disappears. No pressure, no sales pitch, just a clear look at what you're actually paying for and whether it still makes sense. Now, most people, they're already calling the phone number down below, 909-563-8279, or they're visiting askchapter.org/Ron to take a look. All right, so let's get back to the story. And this is really where it stops being local. Minneapolis, Minnesota didn't become the symbol by accident. It became the symbol because every unresolved tension in the country converged right there at once. Immigration enforcement, activist interference, political opportunism, and federal authority under President Donald J. Trump. The death of Renee Nicole Good wasn't just a tragic endpoint. This was the spark that enforced how fragile the system becomes when emotion tries to overrule law. Why Minneapolis? Because it sits at the intersection of loud activism and soft governance. Because Ilhan Omar represents a style of politics that thrives on confrontation with federal power. Because ICE and DHS chose enforcement over appeasement. And because millions of Americans across party lines recognized the stakes immediately. This backlash crossed lines because it wasn't ideological at its core. It was existential. People who disagree on policies still understand boundaries. They understand that blocking federal agents, crowding enforcement vehicles, and turning tragedy into leverage, this is a road to chaos. Minneapolis became the mirror. And what happens when no one yields and the law is tested in public? This is why the rally spread. This is why the outrage didn't fade. The city became the proving ground for whether order still holds. So here's what made this explode even further. Americans weren't watching the same story. On one side, conservative outlets focused on ICE's legal authority, DHS protocols, and the documented tactics of ICE Watch. They emphasized enforcement, obstruction, and the risks agents face when activism crosses into interference. But on the other side, legacy media flattened the story into a morality play, federal force versus a grieving audience and community, while minimizing activist coordination and political escalation. What was emphasized matters. What was ignored mattered more. In one reality, Ilhan Omar was standing up to power. In the other, she was inflaming a volatile scene and undermining lawful operations. So in one frame, Renee Good was a symbol. In the other, she was an activist whose choices intersected tragically with enforcement. That split didn't just confuse viewers, it collapsed trust. When people realized the same footage could produce opposite conclusions, skepticism hardened. Audiences stopped asking who was right and started asking who was honest. And once that question enters the room, control of the narrative is gone. So this is where it went off script. Ilhan Omar believed that showing up in Minneapolis in the immediate aftermath of Renee Nicole Good's death would put her in control of the narrative. But instead, it did the exact opposite. By inserting herself into an active ICE enforcement environment governed by DHS protocols under President Donald J. Trump, she escalated a volatile situation and handed her critics a defining image. Politics colliding with law enforcement in real time. Now, the mistake wasn't empathy. It was timing and posture. Showing up before facts were established, flanked by activists linked to ICE Watch. This turned a tragedy into a test of authority. When access was denied at the Whipple ICE Processing Center, the moment reframed her role from advocate to agitator in the eyes of many viewers. Now, that single clip right there unified opposition across ideological lines because it suggested an attempt to pressure federal agents mid-operation. So instead of de-escalation, the visit amplified stakes. Instead of oversight, it looked like spectacle. And instead of broadening support, it narrowed it, pushing moderates and independents to question whether political theater was replacing governance. The visit did not strengthen Ilhan Omar's position, it exposed its limits. So here's the reality moving forward. ICE is not retreating. DHS is not rewriting the rules. And under President Donald J. Trump, federal enforcement isn't being paused to accommodate outrage cycles. The message that emerged from Minneapolis, it was unmistakable. Activism no longer shields consequences when it crosses into obstruction, and emotion no longer overrides the law. The political aftershocks will linger. Senator Joni Ernst intervention reset expectations, facts over fury, statute over spectacle. The exposure of ICE Watch's tactics hardened public skepticism, and the denial at the Whipple ICE Processing Center, this signaled a boundary that many assumed no longer existed. Elections will test this divide, but the reckoning has already begun. Voters are watching how leaders respond when tragedy meets responsibility. They're measuring who steadies the moment and who inflames it, and they're deciding whether governance still means enforcing the law or bending it under pressure. Minneapolis wasn't an endpoint, it was a warning. The era of plausible deniability is closing. Enforcement will continue, accountability will sharpen, and the next time that politics tries to overrun the law in public, the country will remember how this one ended. That's the truth, and we'll see you next time. Be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for future news and analysis.